I think Harris is going to win. So, a lot of you guys know me for my political debates on YouTube. However, over on Instagram and TikTok, I do political analysis. Specifically in this regard, obviously the election is coming up, so I've been focusing a lot on that. If you guys want to check it out, it's in the link tree below. You can go over to my Instagram or my TikToks. And there seems to be a lot of doomerism going on among the Democrats in regards to the polls. I have maintained and continue to maintain the belief that Harris is going to comfortably win this election. What the actual margins will be, not really sure. But the reality is we've seen a whole dump of polls, I think 80 or so in the last month, that are pro-Trump. They're Republican-backed polls that are really shifting the averages. Not a lot, but enough to scare people. Inherently, this is beneficial for the Democrats because all it's doing is driving fundraising and driving people out to vote. Now, my suspicion with this and why she's going to win is really predicated on the fact that Donald Trump hasn't done a good job talking to any other groups that he would bring in. In 2016, he targeted rural white voters in Wisconsin. In 2020, he targeted rural voters across the country, and he did so to pretty good effect, but he got them to show up at incredibly high rates. Rates that just might not even be sustainable, but certainly I don't believe that he would be getting more share of a vote from them. That seems really unlikely to have that high of a turnout. But even in the polling, it's not reflected that those voters are going for him at a higher rate. In fact, it's reflected that they're going for him at a lower rate. So Donald Trump winning here is really predicated on groups showing up for him that have never showed up for him before. These polls are showing that the black vote is going to show up for Donald Trump at 30% or 20%. And in 2020, we saw polls that showed a similar thing. None of that materialized. I have a hard time seeing where Donald Trump is going to pick up a win here. And a lot of the political, pundits in terms of the polls seem to be pretty scared to say what they're all thinking because a lot of them got burned, which is the Democrats are in a stellar position to win the election. Harris is outperforming against Joe Biden in a lot of district level polls, which indicates that the state level polls might be missing a significant portion of Harris support. And it's driving a lot of people to panic. And I have not had any panic about this election or any concerns because fundamentally there's nothing indicating that Donald Trump is going to do well or outperform what he did in 2020. Even more so, there's not really even good evidence that this is going to be close. A lot of the independent pollsters, Washington Post did averages, showed Harris up in four, of the swing states, three of which he needs to win. But that's just sort of like my beliefs on that, right? That I don't really see where he's getting these voters. And it's sort of been confirmed as the early votes moved along. So the early vote was showing that Democrats surged really early. They got a huge, substantial lead, and then Republicans started surging and then some. And that created a concern where it's like, okay, well, are the numbers in my mind correct then, right? Are a lot of these going to be Republican voters? We don't really know. And so nobody could draw a really clear conclusion. The only conclusion you could really draw is it looked very similar to 2020. Now, however, we've seen that shift. So Republicans were targeting the early vote. They were doing a really good job at it and getting their base out. And now that's sort of tapered off, that support. And we've watched in 3 states, 2 of these are modeled. So they're not actual representation. It's just modeled based on what other states are coming in as, where Democrats are now leading in terms of representative share over what they were in 2020 in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia. On top of that, the trend of Republicans picking up steam in terms of the collective vote has started to downtrend, meaning Democrats are going up in representative share of their voting in 3 other states, with the exception of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a bit of an enigma. There's a lot of outstanding vote and just not really sure what to make of the early data there. But it doesn't look good for Republicans. Certainly, it doesn't look worse than the other states right now, but it doesn't look good for them. So I generally have not changed my mind about this race. I think that Harris support, Roe voters, they're done with Trump. I think there's a lot of Republicans, and I know that there's a lot of people pointing to these big Republican names and going, oh, look, they're leaving the Republican Party. I don't really think that anybody's following them, but I do think that those people represent a lot more moderate Republicans that are over Trump, and we see them dropping him at a crazy rate. I don't see, if this is a tie race, Harris wins in almost all scenarios. Just because her ground game is more effective, Donald Trump has outsourced it to Elon Musk, guy that has no idea what he's doing, obviously is going to take directive control over this. I think it's going to be a colossal failure. We'll have to see. But generally speaking, I think that the Democrats, in a scenario where it's a complete tie, are just going to do better. She's already closer to 270, so she needs less states than him. She's winning in a lot of the independent polls. And it's going to be very difficult for Donald Trump to make up that margin, especially when his relative approval ratings haven't moved. Harris, however, she's had her approval rating move 16 points, 14 to 16 points, depending on the poll, and has seen no real increase in support in the polls. That's a big red flag to me. I don't think that the Republicans come through with a win here, because worst case scenario, we're in a tie right now. I don't see Donald Trump overperforming. I think that these Republican polls are looking very hard to find Donald Trump voters, and they're just not finding them. And I think that it's far more likely that Harris is going to come out on top here in any scenario where it's tied. I don't think Donald Trump, like I said, I don't think that he overperforms at all. I think that that's all cooked in. I think everybody is a very, very bombastic Trump supporter, and he hasn't done a good job of targeting. However, the margin that, if we're looking at this from a margin perspective, Trump ekes by a win or Harris goes full-blown blowout. That's where we're at in this election. I think it'll end up somewhere in the middle. It could be a disastrous election for the Republicans. It could be a historic landslide that nobody saw coming. I don't tend to think that that's going to be the case. I think that this is probably going to be a high turnout election. I think it's going to be relatively close, within a few points in each state, with the exception of a few. I think, Georgia, North Carolina, Wisconsin will probably go within a point or two of wherever the polling average is right now. I think it's likely to go in Harris's favor. And I think Pennsylvania probably goes by 3 to 4 points. I think it's hard for me to go out and look and find anything that supports a Donald Trump win, except the polls. And we've seen that they've been inundated by Republican pollsters. I am incredibly confident, to the point where it's given me anxiety about this election. Like, why am I so confident? And the reality is, in this election, over the past ones, there's no real red flags. There's no real red flags to indicate that Republicans are going to do really well. It's all the metrics are working in the Democrats' favor. So, in my mind, if Harris loses, it would be a shocking turn of events. And I think that would indicate that there's a big, major demographic shift in the United States. And maybe the Democrats don't come on top with the youth vote anymore, or at least by as big a margins, or maybe there's a shift in the minority vote. And that just seems unlikely. So where I'm at right now, and if you guys want more election coverage, link tree in the bio, head over to my Instagram or my TikTok account. And I actually have a couple of TikTok accounts. You want to check through the whole link tree. But that's where I'm at. If that changes, I'll update you guys. But, also, over on OK High, that's where, which is in the link tree as well, that's the YouTube where if I post election content, that's where it's going to go. So there's your update. I hope that helps, and I'll keep you guys updated if anything changes.